It's everyone's duty to be active in these initiatives against sexual violence. We are all part of this community. A big part of that is taking on the responsibility to make sure everyone in the community is safe from everything, all forms of violence.
Good morning. Welcome to Gender Neutral. My name is Josh MacLeader. With me today, I have two coordinators from Take Back the Night.
When Take Back the Night was first brought to Barnard, it was a women's-only space, created by women for women. That remained a defining part of the march for several years.
Women are raised with the fear of violence, with the expectation that it might happen to us, that when we walk down the street alone at night, we're not afraid of being mugged, we're afraid of being raped.
Now, more than 2 decades later, the Take Back the Night march is completely gender neutral after continued lobbying from many groups.
I felt that men had to be reached on campus.
We don't want to have a situation where you see someone in the front and someone says, "Oh, is that a woman? Are you a woman?" You know, there's all sorts of problems that can happen with that.
What happened during the intervening years that inspired the march to change from a women's-only space to a gender-neutral one?
In 1988, delegates from each of the Seven Sisters colleges met at Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Among those delegates was Leah Copperman, a junior at Barnard College.
It was like February 1988, and the Radcliffe students had this, they already were doing Take Back the Night at Radcliffe, and they brought to the Seven Sisters group the idea that all of the campuses should hold a Take Back the Night on the same date to try and, have some media coverage because it would be so widespread.
Leah Copperman brought this idea back to Barnard, rallying a small group of students to organize a march in just under 2 months.
We did this guerrilla postering of campus and the streets with wheat paste so that they couldn't take it down, of stats about violence against women, and we put them up everywhere for 2 weeks before the event, Take Back the Night and a stat.
In one flyer distributed on campus, the organizers explained their rationale for establishing the march as a women's-only event. We walk together in the places men prevent us from walking alone. 120th Street, Frat Row, Riverside Park, even Butler Library. Women marched to acknowledge that sexual violence happens on campus. The coordinators wrote, "The university denies attacks. They don't tell us when these things happen. Instead, they say, don't go into Harlem, a racist and classist assertion when we can be attacked right in the library stacks."
That first day, that first march, we were like, are there going to be 50 people here? We're there, we're waiting for people to show up, and at first, there aren't that many, and then, it ended up being something like 400 people, and we were just like, wow.
Although sexual assault was considered an issue, the leaders didn't think the march would draw as many students as it did.
It just wasn't mainstream an issue the way that it is now. It was really the crazy feminists that were doing it. I think we were all surprised, the planners were really surprised, because we sort of felt like this fringy kind of group.
After the march, both men and women gathered on McIntosh Lawn for a public speak out.
I remember a man getting up and talking about being sexually abused as a child, and though we all knew that happened to men as well as to boys as well as girls, that a man getting up and actually speaking about it was you just never ever heard that.
This moment of a man speaking publicly about his own experience with sexual violence complicated many people's understanding of how men fit into the larger discussion of sexual assault and Take Back the Night itself.
There was a lot of back and forth tension over the years about whether men should be involved in the march or not.
But this tension wasn't new.
We were inarticulate at that point because we were so shaken and traumatized by what had happened.
In the fall of 1986, 2 Barnard students were sexually assaulted outside their dorms, sparking a widespread community discussion about sexual assault that included both women and men. 2 years later, when Take Back the Night began, Dennis Dalton, a professor of political science at Barnard, remembered these discussions and felt the march wrongly excluded men.
There was a great deal of resistance to men being included at that time. that led to a Columbia CDC student coming to me and saying, well, if we're going to get the men included, let's form a separate organization. And that's when Columbia Men Against Violence was started.
Columbia Men Against Violence was started in 1991. Dennis Dalton was the first faculty advisor of the group, which included 30 to 50 active members.
Columbia Men Against Violence is a group that is dedicated to ending men's violence against women, children, and other men. A peer education organization that works to strengthen the community by promoting awareness and providing space to heal and change.
Michael Brous was one of the leaders of Columbia Men Against Violence in 1998 and a proponent of a gender-inclusive Take Back the Night march.
In the earlier years in Take Back the Night, it was very, very clear that it was a women-run organization and it's a women's-only event. I think as we started to work together and create more consciousness around the wider community and men taking responsibility to deal directly with issues of sexual violence and also to directly support our lovers and survivors, I think there became a place in the conversation for men to take a small public role together.
In 1998, Take Back the Night coordinators unanimously voted to include men in the second half of the march. A flyer distributed around campus said, "Sexual violence is a men's issue primarily because men have the power to help prevent it. One simple step towards prevention involves men listening to and supporting women whenever they share their experiences with violence." Both sexes walked along 114th Street. The coordinators decided that by marching together down this highly visible block, men and women will affirm their unwillingness to tolerate sexual violence in front of a significant portion of the Columbia community.
I do remember the women walked the majority of it alone. There was a section where we all came together as a community, and it was really just an extraordinary experience of overall support and unity together. We were really marching as partners with the women of Take Back the Night, and we always wanted to preserve a safe space for women only, and then we also wanted to create additionally a place for men and women on campus, for all people to come together to create the right kind of community that is safe for all members of the community.
In 2008, the structure of the Take Back the Night march changed again. Group leaders decided that men could join for the full duration of the march, but could not be at the front. The front of the march would be preserved as a women's-only space.
There were members of the group who wanted to keep the women's space because they felt they wanted us to acknowledge the statistics that women are more likely to be survivors and victims of violence than men. And they felt like also that it was a historically kind of like women's-led initiative, and we should honor that symbolically with the women's space at the front.
So the members at that time thought that that would be a good balance between, you know, accommodating the concerns of some survivors, but also recognizing that we needed to be more inclusive regarding who's actually a survivor of sexual violence.
Almost immediately after this new structure was implemented in 2008, several members of Take Back the Night objected to the women's-only space in the front of the march.
Keeping men at the back of the march, making a space where they couldn't be, that sort of implicitly prioritized or placed women's experiences as survivors as more important, maybe, than other genders.
Despite these concerns, the structure remained the same until 2012.
When Slut Walk New York happened, a lot of Take Back the Night members went. And we were really struck by the fact that Slut Walk was all gender inclusive, and it was huge, and it felt like this really community-based, supportive, safe, powerful space.
Hundreds gathered in Union Square to protest rape culture during Slut Walk New York City in fall 2011.
A lot of people who had been skeptical of making the march Take Back the Night all in gender inclusive kind of like reevaluated their position based on the success of Slut Walk. It was decided that for the first time ever, Take Back the Night would be all gender inclusive, which was very exciting for me as a senior and a longtime member of Take Back the Night.
I don't want to say it amazes me because I feel like it's everyone's duty to be active in these initiatives against sexual violence, but it's just, I guess, reassuring to me that there are men and masculine identified students who do join the march and are very active in the march in terms of like speaking and holding up signs and chanting.
Although Take Back the Night is now gender neutral, the topic of inclusivity is still an important one for the group.
Students from different marginalized groups may not feel comfortable coming to Take Back the Night meetings. It's one thing to say that Take Back the Night is open to all students, but it's a completely different story when you look at a lived experience and someone comes to the meeting and all they see are people who don't look like them.
Camille pointed to women of color in particular.
I am very aware of the fact that women of color on Columbia's campus and Barnett's campus do not feel included in the movement on campus. In the past 3 exhibitions that I have experienced while I've been here, Take Back the Night has only invited white women to speak. We should put in the effort to find women of color who can speak towards these issues so that everyone on campus can feel like their needs are being addressed.
At events such as Sexhibition, Take Back the Night also hopes to include speakers from the trans community.
We definitely do need to consider events that are specific to the needs of trans individuals, trans survivors, because that is really the only way that we can address the unique experiences of oppression that do exist that are like extremely entangled with sexual violence.
In its 26 years of existence, Take Back the Night has constantly reflected on what inclusivity means and how to achieve it. The march is committed to being a supportive space for everyone, regardless of their gender identity or race. At its core, it is a space for healing and unity.
Silent no more, we are, each of us, born anew, as sisters, our flesh of the same flesh, our pain of the same pain. Yes, it is true, we did take back the night, but in doing so, we took back ourselves.